Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the monthly webinar, K-12 webinar on invention or in intellectual property for K-12 educators. We are so excited to see so many people here this evening. I must admit, this is the largest audience we've ever had for one of these monthly webinars, and I have to assume that that is because of the two amazing guests that we have here with us this evening. We are honored and humbled and super excited to welcome the director, Drew Hirshfeld, who is performing the functions and duties of the Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property and Director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO. And of course, everyone knows that is a mouthful. But Drew Hirshfeld, his permanent role is as Commissioner for Patents. He manages and leads the Patents Organization as the Chief Operating Officer and is responsible for managing and directing all aspects of the organization that affect administration of patent operations, examination policy, patent quality engagement, international patent cooperation, resources and planning, and budget administration. Drew began his career in 1994 as a patent examiner and became a supervisory patent examiner in 2001. He received his Bachelor of Science from the University of Vermont and a JD from Western New England College School of Law. And just fun fact, Drew was my first supervisor when I returned to the USPTO way back in 2011. Thank you so much for being here this evening, Drew. Did you want to say a few words before we introduce Doug?
Sure, and thank you, Joyce. I will just say it's absolutely my pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm going to keep my remarks very short, but I do want to share one topic with you because for the USPTO, and you all just learned that I'm temporarily in the role of leading the USPTO. My biggest initiative, the initiative that's most important to me, is our initiative of expanding people who have access to innovation and use and utilize innovation. And we have started a national council called our Council for Inclusive Innovation with the intent of finding ways to educate people about innovation so that more people use and engage in innovation because it's a benefit to all of us. And we are finding that there's many underrepresented groups such as women and minorities who are not innovating as much as others. And so our biggest driver is to have this council, which is created to create a national strategy on how we can expand innovation. And we literally had a meeting today of the council, and the Secretary of Commerce herself is leading this council, and we have members. It's a public-private partnership. It's a wonderful way to create a strategy. I'm really excited about this, but that has made me all day long. I've been thinking about this discussion with Doug Scott, who you're going to hear about in a minute from Joyce, so I don't want to give any of his background, but I've been really excited about this conversation because you couldn't have something that fits better with our initiatives, and that I've spent most of today on ways that we can expand innovation. So I'm just thrilled to have this conversation, thrilled to be here with all of you. So thanks, Joyce, for having me.
Thank you, Drew. And it is my pleasure now to introduce to you Doug Scott. Doug Scott is an educator from the state of Massachusetts. He is an engineering and robotics teacher at Hopkinton High School in Massachusetts. He is a presidential awardee for excellence in math and science teaching, which is the highest civilian award provided to K-12 educators. And so that just gives you an idea of the caliber of teacher that Doug is. But the amazing thing about Doug is just his ability to bring together communities, to work with first responders, and to get students engaged in this thing called Invention education. He has been a mentor and certainly a champion among educators, and has brought intellectual property subjects and creative works into his classroom. And so I ask you, Doug, do you have a few things that you'd like to say before we get started?
No, I'm super excited to be here tonight, and I hope that everybody walks away from this conversation knowing that Every teacher that's present here or that you know is perfectly capable of doing these types of works in invention education, and that every kid is capable as well. I've seen every type of student that's come through my door be successful at one level or another, and have learned some really important skills, both for not just technical, but what I would consider strong life skills. So I think the big thing is just walk away from this knowing that you can do it. I am living proof that if I can do this, anybody can do it. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I am going to then turn off my camera and turn things over to Drew and Doug, and we look forward to the conversation.
Okay, well, thank you again, Joyce, and Doug, thank you for not only joining us here and for sharing your thoughts, but also for being an educator. Our educators don't get enough recognition, so you know, I'm thrilled to have you here. I'm going to have a whole bunch of questions for you, and we'll see what direction it goes. But let me start with a basic question about what is invention education that Joyce mentioned.
Invention education. So this one comes up all the time, right? Whenever you mention invention education, it's not common terminology. Maybe someday it will join the long list of acronyms in education as just IE. But currently, the way that I would define invention education is, I always say this, like people, they know what project-based learning is. So you hear project-based learning, you think of, I always tease Jorge about this, but egg drops, bridge building, your traditional, you know, STEM projects that are project-based. The thing with invention education is I always refer to it as it's problem-based. It's problem-based. So the fact of the matter is you're turning the keys over to the student to identify a problem, and they have to learn how to vet and make sure that that problem is viable and one that should be solved. And then they choose the solution through a process that they go through. They ultimately, you know, choose the solution to go with. And I think that choice within builds in intrinsic motivation for students, which is different than just project-based learning. So you can still provide them with a box to work within, or some topic or whatever it might be. But within that, they can start to work and identify problems. I think the problem identification is the hardest part of invention, in my opinion. And I watch the students struggle with it. And when I see that struggle, I realize that they're thinking at a level that they would not have otherwise if I prescribed the problem. That's my definition of invention education.
Thank you. So that very, very helpful. It definitely gives me and the audience a good insight into that. But the thought I was having as you were answering is there's so many areas where there are problems, of course, right? Where you could have, you know, you could identify and pursue a solution to a problem, but you've chosen problems that all resolve in some way about intellectual property and invention. So why the tie to intellectual property and invention?
I think again, this is, you know, my opinion, that it's a tremendous learning opportunity for students to learn about not only creating, but while you're creating and inventing, to understand some of the legalities involved with protecting your intellectual property and what is intellectual property, and opening up some discussion so that students start to become aware that there's a whole bunch of things going on behind the scenes of products that they purchase, products that they consume, you know, even things that they just see advertised. They start to realize that there's a whole industry working behind the scenes to make sure that they protect their intellectual property. And then you start to say, well, if that much time and resources is being spent on protecting the intellectual property, why? And what's its value? And you start to realize the value of the intellectual property and the ownership of it. And we do everything from inventions for first responders to toy invention, assistive devices, whole bunch of things. And when they start to see the inventors and start to read some of the patents and start to understand who these people are and what they went through to protect things, I think there's a lot to learn there, more so than just hammering something together and saying, look what I made. You know, I don't know.
I wish we had like 2 or 3 hours for this conversation because you know, obviously I've spent my whole career in intellectual property and patents, and I couldn't agree with you anymore. I think it is a great way to learn. You know, we research the impact of intellectual property and that's really why we're trying to push more education on intellectual property. But let me just share a number because I can't help myself. But industries that utilize IP responsible for 62.5 million jobs in 2019, which is 44% of the total U.S. workforce, right? And it's just staggering the number. So getting kids involved in this is huge. You know, so I just really applaud what you're doing. But that leads me to how did you stumble on this? How did you get to this point where you made this connection to invention education?
Like a lot of things in my life, pure luck, I'd say. I had done a lot of project-based learning, and I ended up in a situation where I became introduced to 2 different groups. The first was the Lemelson MIT program, and there I ended up meeting Dr. Lee Esterbrooks, and how that worked was I was at a conference, I heard her speak. I actually got up and left her session early because I said, there's no way I have time to do that. I'm already doing too many things, so I left. And then I received a cold call from her because I was an attendee at this thing, and she convinced me to take a look at it. I went on to work with a group of students to get a grant through the Lemelson MIT program. And then, you know, as I worked through that program and the kids did their work on their invention, I ended up getting introduced to Joyce Ward at the USPTO and her team. And both groups were fantastic in welcoming me in. And I have to be honest, the Lemelson MIT program, when I first went there, I had to go and stay in the dorm and go into the campus and everything. And not to be funny, but I was surprised that they would even let me in the doors of MIT. I didn't consider myself at that level, right? And then when I started working with Joyce and her team, you know, here I am tonight speaking to the director of USPTO. I still consider myself this person that has just kind of found my way into this. Now, once I started working with the 2 groups, at first the whole focus was on the work that we were doing with the Lemelson MIT program. But then when I started working with Joyce and her team through their NSTI program and all those different things, I started drawing more resources and bringing it more into the classroom. So it wasn't just a one-off project. It became units within my curriculum, and I had converted engineering projects into invention education projects, which honestly have a lot more meaning with the kids. And recently, everybody wants data, right? You know, everybody's data driven. I can tell you data when I look at kids and I see their reaction and I see their faces while they're working on things. And I can tell you which ones they're more engaged in and not. And the other day we ended our first semester and I asked them, I said, here's 4 projects we did this semester. Which ones were your favorites? And I had them do a quick vote, and hands down, it was basically a tie between inventing toys for 4th graders in our town, inventing for first responders in our town, and then in 3rd place was an invention that they did for themselves. And then last was a traditional STEM project of building small catapults, which had its value, but clearly it came in dead last, and it has the last couple of years. And so for me, that's enough proof right there. And the kids said they really liked working with the fourth graders. They really liked working with the first responders. So that tells me that the empathy within those projects, the connection with somebody else, is super important, as opposed to when they invented something for themselves. They thought that was fun and neat, but I only do that to get them introduced to the concept, because it's a difficult concept. Introduce them to the concept. Okay, now you know how to go through the invention process. Now we're going to take that and start working with other people. But it's hands down every time. Those ones where we invent with other people in the community are the winners.
No, that's great to hear, and that's a testament to you and the kids. And it people don't recognize the link between IP and humanitarian purposes. We actually give recognition and awards to humanitarian inventions. So you're melting my heart, honestly, as we're talking, because it's just great to hear these from you. I know we have a lot of educators in the audience, and a lot of people are probably asking themselves, could I do that? So let me ask the question. You said everybody can do it when you started, but what's your background? Like, do you have an engineering and law background?
No, and no. I'll put myself out there. I'm a person that, if it helps anybody if anybody's thinking that they can't do this, I can reassure you that you can, that it is possible. The skills can be learned, the processes can be learned. For me, I was a really not great high school student. I really had no direction or path. What lay before me was to enter into a family business, which I was fully on board with. I went to a state college here in Massachusetts, and I chose that college because I could go there and play hockey. Okay. So there was no real vision for the future. Okay. Because I definitely wasn't going to the NHL. So I went, played hockey, enjoyed it. I was a business undergrad, because what else are you going to do if you don't know what you're going to do? You study business, right? It's not a total blow off major, but it's also what it is. It's, I'm a business major, covers everything, right? So I did that. Got out of college, went to work in my family business, which was window cleaning, carpet cleaning, all that stuff. So I was the guy up on the ladders. I was the guy up on the roofs doing all the gutter cleaning and all that stuff. I had been doing that since I was a kid. Did that. And after a few years, I was coaching hockey with a friend of mine in town. And he asked me one night, what are you going to do, the rest of your life, this and that? And he said, I think you'd be a decent teacher. He says, I watch you, working with kids on the ice here. You'd be a good teacher. And honestly, 9/11 happened. And after 9/11, I was one of those career changers, and I sat down at a table and thought about, what can I be? And it was police, fire. I could be a surveyor. I remember surveyor was on the list, and teacher was on the list. So I started exploring things. I shadowed my old hockey coach from high school, who was a teacher. Thought I might like that. So I started going to school at night. I lived out of a work van for a year, just running around doing coaching, classes, student teaching, doing everything I could to get through that. And then I went into teaching, and I started out teaching business classes, which were at that time Microsoft Office classes. I was the person that taught kids how to do spreadsheets, how to type documents. And this is back when they still had the little paperclip guy in Microsoft Word. So this was a while ago. And what happened was I had a group of kids that we had a computer repair class as well. Ended up having a group of kids, they wanted to do something, and a friend of mine showed me a project in Popular Mechanics, I think it was, or whatever it was. And We ended up building an underwater robot, had fun with it. The kids found an old steam wreck. We ran into some people that were looking for something. We used it for that. And then when I came back to the school, they said, can you do more of that? And it just went on and on from there. And pretty soon I wasn't teaching PowerPoint. I was, we were doing things in that space, but we started out very limited. We started out with 2 folding ping pong tables, and I was grabbing junk out of the trash cans and everything else. And so from a standpoint of being a teacher doing it, anyone can do it. And from the standpoint of resources, you can do this very inexpensively. And then what happens is, I always say, people like to back a winning team, right? Everybody's a big fan when the team's winning. So if you want your administration to put money into a program, I think it's healthy to put up a few W's and a few wins before you start asking for large amounts of money. And so by proving that we could do some things, all of a sudden the district was excited and they started giving us a little bit of funding to get things going more. So that's kind of the path that I took. I taught in one school district for 12 years, ended up going to another district to start from scratch again. But it was a lot better the second time because at least I had somewhat of a clue of what I was doing at that point. So that's a little bit of the path. And again, I've run into people where I've been fortunate enough to win some awards, and that's nice. And I can assure you that I've sat there at those things where they're talking about the other person and their resume. My resume doesn't even compare. I'm not even in the same stratosphere as these people. But through some hard work and some innovation in teaching, I've made up for my lack of planning in life. I don't know.
Well, you've obviously done extremely well, and I thank you for the story. Really wonderful to hear your progression to an award-winning teacher. So kudos to you. I know we're going to run out of time pretty soon. I probably have enough time for 1 or 2 more questions, and the former patent examiner in me has to ask about the patent. So I know that you and your kids achieved a patent. Can you tell us a little bit about, very high level what that invention is? And I'll tell you right now, my second question will be what was it like to get the patent? What did you go through? So you can answer both together, or I can come back to it if you want.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, we've had students, patent things. We've had a number of provisional patents that students have worked on through capstone courses that we offer, that we started a couple years ago. But originally, a team that I had at Natick High School, who Joyce was familiar with, at that time I was working through the Lemelson MIT program and their invent teams. That was an invent team. And that's when I met Joyce and her team and got invited to NSTI and learned more of what I should be doing. Those kids worked on their patent, and I can say this from the get-go that all the patents that the kids have worked on, including that one, the intent was never to make money. That was not the intent. From my standpoint, it was, you've gone this far, you've done everything that there could be to do with this invention. Why don't you see if you can learn something else? Why don't you acquire a patent if you can? So they went through that. And we've honestly, on that first one, we really lucked out. We lucked out because I had no clue. I was following the advice of Lee Esterbrooks at MIT, Lemelson MIT. I was following the advice of Joyce Ward at USPTO in terms of learning more and figuring some things out. Ended up with, no joke, we had 2 parents of these kids. We had 24 kids on this patent. 2 of those kids had parents that were actually patent attorneys, but they were not utility patent or mechanical engineers or anything like, they were in the bio realm and different things. And so they actually had to kind of go back to school a little bit to figure out how to help us in this process because they had never really done these types of patents. And I didn't know that at the time. You just think of a patent, but it's not. Anyway, we went through that. It took us a few years because It was hard working with that many people and figuring out who was an inventor and who was not. We had more people on the project, but through keeping engineering notebooks and discussions, we determined who the actual inventors were. We had worker bees and we had inventors. We had people that turned a wrench, but they weren't inventors. And so we had to do that. And then we went through the process of applying for the patent. We did the provisional patent first before we publicly disclosed. And when the kids went back to file the official patent, it got rejected a couple of times. The first time was we ran into a patent that was held by a person in the United States, and the machine could do all of the things that the kids' machine could do. And it was funny because the kids sat down with the patent and then they went through all of the claims, and the kids disclaimed all of the claims by saying, no, we did that. That doesn't work. No, we did that. It doesn't work. The machine that the kids invented was a ice search and recovery system designed to drive basically a small machine across a sheet of ice, drop an ROV through a hole in the ice, and search for drowning victims so that first responders didn't have to gear up and risk their own lives. And the only difference between their machine and that one was that the ROV portion could move horizontally. So the kids put in a claim of horizontal movement, and that helped. But then they were rejected because the drawings they submitted, one drawing had shading in it. It was a beautiful drawing the kid did. It was beautiful shading and everything, but the patent examiner didn't like that. And they also didn't like the fact that the patent drawings were not dark enough in the lines. They were done in light pencil. So they had to retrace everything in Sharpie, replace that other drawing, change that one claim, submit it, and then eventually they got the patent. And the feeling was great because it felt like a complete process. Not only did they actually invent something, but they followed through with the whole process as anyone would in industry. And those kids got an experience that was beyond what I had imagined them doing. And honestly, when they started that whole project, they chose what I thought was the hardest problem to solve and the hardest solution to build, but they did it. And since then, it's been honestly easier for me after going through all that. It's been easier to help students get provisional patents in a capstone, and then giving them the option if they wanted to pursue a full patent, they could. And I always say to them, it's pretty exciting for you to walk away from the high school as an inventor. How many kids can say that, you know? And it's a great sense of accomplishment for the kids. And even if you can't file an official US patent, and that's not in the cards for you yet, even in class, when the kids do their different invention projects, they submit simulated patents with me. And the simulated patent template that we use was something that I had attorneys help with. I had Joyce and her team at NSTI help me, you know, refine it. I will say that this is a funny one, Mr. Hirshfeld. I'll tell you, this is a good one. The only comment I got back from the USPTO about my simulated patent was I had to remove the official USPTO logo on the front. I had it up at the top with the eagle. So I replaced it with Sam the Eagle from the Muppets. And I put stars around it. And I said, really good patent. And the kids think it's fun. So it worked out. Anyway.
That's wonderful. I love it that the kids were the ones looking at the prior art and saying how it's different. That's just great that they had that experience and all the way through. So kudos to you. I will just tell you that I also have experience as a student doing a simulated patent, but I was in law school. Right. So I had to wait that long to be exposed to patents. It's wonderful what you're doing. I know we are out of time. I would like to give, first of all, I just want to say, you know, the person who gave you advice that you would be a decent teacher, grossly understated how good you would be. So congratulations to you, and great advice for them to get you into teaching. I wish we had more people doing exactly what you're doing. And again, one of our primary goals is to increase education to children about IP. It has benefits for all of us. But I will let you get the last word here, at least in our discussion, and just say at very high level, what do you have any advice for the folks listening in, knowing there's lots of teachers listening in?
I would just say, try it. Try an invention project. There's great resources online through USPTO Kids. There's great resources through PBS NewsHour Extra that has invention projects. Lemelson MIT has a nice set of projects. All those different things. Try it at a small level, small scale. You don't have to file a patent right away. You don't have to invent the large device. Start with something inexpensive and like cardboard, paper, tape, all the things out of recycle. And honestly, when I went to my new school after 12 years, I had built up that program at my prior school. I was right back where I started. I was in the recycle bin, and I worked it up again from there. Remember that if you show that you can do something, your district will support you. They like to back a winner, but you have to produce something first. Just imagine if your kids came to you and said, I need $15,000, like your own kids, you'd say, for what? You know, and they say, I can do things. And you'd say, what can you do? So just show them what you can do. That's all. That's my advice.
Thank you very much. It has been an absolute pleasure to get the opportunity to have this conversation with you. And thank you again for being here. And I guess now we're back to Joyce for maybe more questions, but maybe questions from the audience.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you both. And we do have a number of questions that have come in this evening. The first one that we have here is from Kelly Shea. She's at the University of Central Florida. She is a sophomore at the University of Central Florida, and in elementary education. She's studying elementary education with a passion for entrepreneurship. I currently have a product with a provisional patent. I am planning on incorporating entrepreneurship into my lesson plans for elementary age students because I believe it is very important for them to learn the vocabulary early on. I am typically the only female in entrepreneur groups I am involved in on campus. My question is how to get more females involved in the program and more excited about entrepreneurship. So thank you, Kelly, for your question.
Kelly, thank you. And I promise this is not a plant. That question leads to some work that I've been involved with for a while. Two-part. Number one is the elementary part. 2 years ago, I did write a book with Lee Esterbrooks. It's called Be the Inventor for pre-K through 2. And it specifically is designed to introduce students to IP. And we worked with a friend of mine named Rick Keene from DC Comics. He does all the Batman stuff. And I just known him for a long time, and he helped us do the artwork for it. And so that's Be the Inventor. You can look that up. But the other part with the girls, this is interesting. Okay, so I've been fighting this battle, trying to get more girls into STEM education. You said entrepreneurship, but in my world, it's like the STEM stuff, okay? And we've gone from very low numbers to very high numbers. 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, when we started this program that we are now, this department that we have in Hopkins in high school, that group, we had 7% enrollment of female students in STEM, in this department of ours, in clubs and classes, 7%. As of this fall, we're up to 39%. Okay, not perfect, but from some of the people that I've talked to, it's a pretty strong number. Now, the way we've been able to do that is honestly through shameless campaigns of invitation, events. If I have 3 or 4 girls in class on the first day of class, and I notice that they're a little antsy about being a low number of girls in class, I will go up to them afterwards and I will say, just give me a week. Give me 1 week. If you don't like the class, you're welcome to leave. Don't leave just because there's too many boys here. We also hired a female teacher to teach computer science in our department, and she's been fantastic. That helped a lot. And we changed the dynamics and the ethos or the culture in that area. Previously, before I got there, it was mostly guys, and the projects. I mean, we go into invention education, boys and girls like this, because with all of this, I don't want to turn anybody off to it. I want the boys to be excited about it. I want the girls to do it. Whoever, I always joke that if you have a pulse, you're welcome here, right? So, you know, and that's the truth. Just come in, give me what you got, and you're going to be fine. But previously, before we did invention education type of projects, the kids were shooting potato cannons and blowing stuff up and everything else. And from my observations, that really didn't draw the female crowd. So it wasn't, the curriculum wasn't also geared towards empathy and different things that help draw female students in. I've been yelled at for a whole bunch of things because I one time set up an all-girls robotics team because the girls told me they wanted space. They didn't want boys, they wanted to learn, and then maybe they would switch up. I had a woman yell at me that I was separating them and what was I teaching them? And I said, I don't know what to do. I said, it's either I do this or they don't do it. So I just said, go ahead, yell at me, whatever you want, because I'd rather have the girls there than not. And then the next year they switched up and went to co-ed teams. And it's like, whatever the kids want and makes them feel comfortable, I just want them in and doing this type of work. Anyway, that's my advice about that stuff.
That's wonderful advice. I would love to answer this question too.
Yes, please.
And I know
yes, absolutely, please.
Thank you. I know most people want to hear it from Doug, so I'm going to be really quick. But I mentioned our Council for Inclusive Innovation earlier, and how that is the top priority for USPTO. That really came out of a study that we had done that showed that about 12% of inventors on patents were women, and that is a extremely low number, right? I mean, at STEM, you've got about a third are women. That's low number also, but even lower on patenting. So we've been asking ourselves the same question about how do we increase participation from women and girls and all underrepresented groups. And that is the whole point of our Council for Inclusive Innovation. And I think you'll see from us in the coming months, hopefully towards spring, a whole strategy, a national strategy to address this exact issue. But I'll also just say at its core, you need more people like Doug, because what your story was just absolutely fantastic. And girls need role models. They need to see people inventing. You need to know that I can do this too. And so we are going to address this in all kinds of ways. And I'll also just say my last thing here is I mentioned I'm temporary in this position. We've got a wonderful woman, Kathy Vidal, who's been nominated to be permanent in this role. Upon her confirmation, she will be the second woman female to lead the patent office, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And I know that this is a priority of hers as well.
Thank you both. And Drew, just so you know, there are lots of questions here for both you and Doug on this. So the next question that we have here in the queue is from Rachna Nath, and she wants to know whether the school district can claim proprietary rights over a high school student invention since he or she is not completing a work for hire. And she does have a part B to that question. So you and Drew can tell me if you want the part B now or you want to handle that first one first.
throw the B at us.
Okay. The second one is if high school students get a grant. Oh, wow. I think Rasha is on her way to law school. She wants to know if the high school students get a grant with no liability clause from the grantor, can the district stop the students from establishing a company from their work product that came out of the grant when they're still in high school? And she is in high school.
Well, I can just give you my experience with this, which has been right or wrong. I have always just kind of gone along. I don't believe that either of the districts that I've been in have specifically an IP policy for students. I've had supportive superintendents that have encouraged this work. I've had nobody pursue the patent and try to strip the students of it. My whole logic with that has been probably too simplistic, which is, does this school system really want to end up on the 6 o'clock news with 20 crying kids on the the steps of a court or something? I don't think so. So in the first district that we were in, we did sign it over because there were too many people on it. So we voluntarily signed that over because it was too many people on the patent. It was crazy. And that's my understanding of that, which isn't very good. And then the grant liability, I'll turn that over to Drew.
So I'm sure if there's any lawyers at USPTO of our legal staff listening into this, they're all panicked about what I'm going to say here. So this is I'm not familiar, honestly, with this issue at the high school level, but I actually have run into many stories about at the collegiate level, similar types of who owns this, et cetera. I unfortunately will have to give you a very high level answer that this is some very, very in-depth contractual law. And I personally don't know if there's one size that fits all. Like, so you're asking, can they do this? Can they do that? I really believe it depends on the contracts that exist. But my advice here is really that's a question you need somebody who's legally versed in this area to be able to answer. So I will have to defer to that. But we can also try, if you want to connect with Joyce after, we can try to connect you with somebody who might have some more information about that. But I'm willing to bet the answer is going to be, it really depends on the contractual, any kind of contractual agreements.
Okay. One question, I'm going to sneak in a question here. Doug, you mentioned that you signed over the patent to the school district. Could you tell people were there any conditions for the students signing that over? Did they want anything in return?
Yes.
Could you share what that was?
Pretty simple. We said we would be happy to sign this over to you, and with the conditions of you will pay for any filing fees that are accrued. And they did, which was nice, right? So that was a load off of us. It got rid of this 24-person patent that we never intended to make money on. And if they wanted to re-up the patent, they could. That was now theirs. And the other condition was that if any, and this was, I thank Lee Estabrooks for this because this was her idea, if any money eventually was made from this patent, which we didn't really think it was. We weren't trying to commercialize it, but if there were any monies that came out of it, that the inventors on the patent, the kids, would form a board or committee, and that money would come into the district and they would distribute it for STEM education purposes within the district. And that was how we kind of made nice all over the place. It was, because it was, I mean, I was looking at this going, this could be a legal nightmare. You've got 24 people on this thing, and what happens if somebody doesn't want to sign it over? What happens if, you know, somebody says, I want to make money on this? And I just said, we just did this to learn. You know, we weren't doing this. And there was one thing about it I didn't really care for either, was I was the adult that was helping the kids. And we had a couple other adults that were in on conversations that were actually listed as inventors, but they listed me first as the first inventor, because at that time I was like the adult. And I never really liked that, because I kind of like to fly under the radar, and like, I don't like to be in pictures of the kids doing their thing and all that stuff. But anyway, that was how we did it.
Also a lesson in critical thinking for the kids, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's
definitely. I mean that sincerely.
Yeah, they were giving up quite a bit, and they had a right to ask for some things. They did. Yeah.
I love the fact that they wanted the any proceeds to go to STEM education, and they were thinking about how it would help the district and how it would help other students. So I just think that's really, really cool.
And that was Lee's thing too, because I mean, trust me, I'm a sports guy and everything, but we didn't want this to go into buying like 500 basketballs for the some team or whatever.
No hockey sticks, no hockey sticks.
No, yeah. I mean, there's enough of that stuff, Okay. We just said we want it to be directed towards something that's related to what these kids were passionate about.
That is great. So Doug, the next question, actually Doug and Drew, the next question we have relates to pro bono support. And actually we've gotten quite a few questions in here asking, how did you go about receiving or getting pro bono support to help with the patent and the patent application? And then the second question, or part two of that, Drew, is whether the USPTO or corporations or nonprofit organizations or other organizations have the ability to help high school students and teachers file for intellectual property protection that's not just based on income. So I guess what they're saying is the pro bono program is generally based on income. Are there programs that support this type of work that are not income contingent?
I will pass that on to Mr. Hirshfeld.
So first of all, a word about the pro bono before I do answer the question. There is a good amount of pro bono assistance there. It is based on income. That depends on different states, is my understanding. So if people are interested in that, we can get you more information. I know we have information on our website, and this is something we're always looking to see how we can partner with attorneys to try to increase the amount of pro bono work that is done. To the specific question about programs that are not income-based, I can speak for the PTO and that what a program that we have that we'd actually like to expand and build on is a pro se art unit. And basically an art unit is that we have all patent examiners, we have about over 8,000 examiners, are divided into art units. And so we have one unit that is just a grouping of people. We have one unit dedicated to people who file patent applications who don't have representation, and they're specifically trained to deal and work with the inventors who don't have an attorney who's steeped in patent law working with them. So that's been a huge success. And it's in my role, people like to reach out and usually if there's a problem, you get a complaint. I get so much positive feedback from the pro se art unit. It's just remarkable with people reaching out on the positive side, which doesn't happen as much as you'd hope in general, right? So that's something that we're doing. And I also know that and this is a law school clinic program. This law schools have the ability to be able to join a clinic of ours and be able to prosecute applications for people. And I'll say I don't know if that has to be like a pro bono limit with money or not, but that is potentially another avenue.
Thank you, Drew. And Doug, just in terms of your the pro bono support that your team received, how did you find the lawyers that helped with that application? And then I know that there have been 12, maybe 13, perhaps as of today, patents that have issued through that LMIT program. Have most of those been pro bono attorneys?
Yeah.
And how did you find them? How did you?
Well, again, my situation I mentioned earlier was pure luck. I had two patent attorneys that were, you know, part of these kids' families, but they were not, again, they were not in that area of patent work. So they actually had to do a lot of learning with us in that process. The pro bono work, I know for the other teams has happened. It's through lawyers in their communities that they've reached out to that have served in pro bono positions. I know that, you know, I know just from scouring the USPTO website too, there's the patent pro bono program that, you know, you can reach out to as well. But yeah, they've had very good success in finding people to help. As far as I know, and I have proven that I am not a lawyer by all of my unconventional ways, but I believe that pro bono work is part of being a member of the bar. So I'm sure that not everybody fulfills that, but there is an obligation there that I think a lot of people do recognize and fulfill. So I think it's an opportunity. It's out there. It's like anything. You gotta shake the trees a little bit to find something.
Yeah, it's state. You know, my understanding is it is state dependent on how much pro bono work people would have to do different states. But you know, going back to the question about there's official pro bono programs which I know most states do have, or maybe all, I don't know, do have restrictions on income, but attorneys can always decide to represent somebody on their own for no charge, and that's, you know, potentially an avenue. I know I have heard stories of that happening, especially with children. So that is certainly a possibility as well, even if it's not in an official, you know, state granted or sanctioned pro bono program.
And the other thing I would say is, just from working with my capstone students now, I mean, we're going through this process now. Even just going through this process is an experience and a learning experience. To acquire a U.S. patent account and number as a you know, customer or member on the e-system, my students do that. We utilize resources that are available on Amazon for, you know, getting some assistance with trying to figure out how to draft. I've also found templates online from different universities that provide templates for drafting a patent. And the kids will go through and do all that, and then they will file as a micro entity on the USPTO e-system. And they can do if I'm not mistaken, the last time I looked, it was $75 for a provisional as a micro entity. So that's what the kids are doing this month. It's due by March 26th, because then they're going to take their invention and they're going to enter it into the Massachusetts Invention Convention. And before they publicly disclose, they're going to file the patent. And I will have, before I start reviewing a lot of this, I'm going to have to sign off an NDA, which I actually do. I sign the NDA and I tell them, I wouldn't steal your product anyway, but this is the process you should go through. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I just play one on TV, you know?
No, that's great. So this next question is from Mr. Johnson at Children's Guild, and he would like to know, one, can he get a copy of your capstone course? Or is that something that you could share, your lesson plans for that? And then is this an honors course? Is it career tech education? Is it a class that is geared towards accelerated students, or is this something that could be adapted for a wide population?
It's actually interesting. I don't know how useful my materials would be, to be honest with you, because the way that it's structured right now, the only way that I was able to get this in, I'm a department head grades 6 through 12, and I teach 3 sections of classes. So I have all these different engineering classes that I rotate through the year. And in one of those blocks, I have 4 to 5 students that participate in capstone each year, and they reside in this other course. So my main focus during that time is on the other kids, I'll be honest. So my whole thing is I set up resources for the students, and I provide them with those resources to help them navigate the process. I do very brief check-ins with them each class and just keep propelling them forward. But really, they are driving that. There is no stand and deliver, lessons that are going on in that situation. They're actively developing their prototypes. They've done their research on patents. They are, going through the USPTO application process. They're also following along with the Invention Convention and keeping an invention log and journal. They're doing all those things. And really my work is in the summertime. I just set it all up. And then when they get in there, they go. And because I sincerely don't have a lot of time to stand over them when they do this. So just being honest, it's not as exciting as people might think. The excitement is, honestly, I don't have to do that because, again, with Invention Education, the kids care more about those projects than they do anything that I would assign them. They're latched onto those. I don't have to say a word to motivate them. They come in, they're on task, they're working on it. And so it's really a simplistic way of doing it, but it works.
I see a CI squared initiative in the PTO's future to help get this information, some background of what you're doing so others can use it.
I could always help set up some sort of structure. It's just, honestly, it's not your traditional curriculum set that you would sit down and everything's mapped out day by day. It's just not that way. And I don't think it could be for an invention process, really, because I really don't know what's going to happen with the kids in their adventure tomorrow. And they constantly have to shift and move laterally through this. It's not a linear process. So,
okay.
Sorry for the non-answer, but it's the truth.
No,
the invention lessons that I do during the classes with those are, again, it's a very few times do I lecture the kids or give a huge lesson. When we do an invention where the kids invented for themselves, they do flashlights and light and circuits. I teach them how to solder. I teach them how to construct circuits, and I teach them about Ohm's law and circuitry. And then I teach them the process of inventing, but it's not a lecture. I facilitate learning. If you came into my classroom, a traditional teacher would look at me and say, "What is he doing? He's not teaching." The real hard work for me is getting everything lined up beforehand and then letting the kids take the wheel.
Okay. And so just in terms of, it looks like we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions left. So I want to go ahead and ask the question from, okay, this person did not put a name, but they wanted to know, they read your article in the Journeys of Innovation. Did you actually get a chance to drive the 2-engine tractor?
I did. I didn't drive it once the kids had it fully complete. The way that I drove it was they built out the chassis for it. Now those 2 tractor treads came off a snowblower, off an old Craftsman snowblower. And we bought it off a guy in Brookline, Mass. And the guy almost cried when I told him we were going to take it apart. he was so proud that this old snowblower worked. And I said, well, we're taking it back to the shop and we're grabbing the treads. We actually made a chassis. The kids made a chassis out of 80-20 aluminum, and they put a battery on it. They put, no kidding, like a light switch from the wall as a on-off. They hooked everything up, and then they made it move. And before long, what we did, not saying to do this, right, but we had a garden cart in the school, and we hitched it up to the treads, and we drove it around the hallway for a while. And we sat in the garden cart and we drove the tank treads, and it pulled us around the hallways. That's the only time I ever drove it. I sat in the cart and drove myself around. That was it.
Okay. And so then, Doug, the other one of the other questions here is, and this is actually for Doug and Drew, how can government and school systems and educators and corporations and philanthropists work together to bring programs like the ones that Mr. Scott has to more students in more parts of the country with diverse populations of students?
I'll answer quickly, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Hirshfeld, because he understands government better than I do. My only take on it is, with all of these companies and people that you meet, again, I go back to the first thing that people always think of is, we need to get money from this company, or we need to get money from this organization. My approach has always been, with any organization, is approach them for help with either mentorship, getting mentorship on projects, or some sort of service. And even something as simple as, we had a project last year where the kids needed to do something outside during COVID, and they had to build something so that they could continue to do robotics. They were able to get wooden pallets from a local pool company, and they dropped everything off to the school. They stacked all the pallets up outside for the kids, and the kids were able to do it. That saved the kids a lot of time and money. And by doing that, they created a relationship with this company. And if we ever need help again in some way, we know that we can call that company. So I would say mentorship and service from companies first, and money will come later, my opinion.
And I'll take the government side about the question about how can government partner. Well, you know, people don't often recognize that a significant role of the USPTO is education and outreach, right? So of course we examine, you know, patent applications and trademark applications and issue patents and trademark registrations, but we also have significant education and outreach. Obviously you all know that because you're sitting in one of our classes, right? One of our monthly programs to help you learn about things that can be done. And there's many others. So we have classes for teaching people about patent basics, trademark basics. And we have, you know, classes geared towards lawyers, engineers, and the general public. And so we try to have a whole variety so we can get people their education. We also have, in addition to the Pro Se Art Unit I mentioned, we have people on staff who can answer questions, you know, helplines, et cetera. So somebody can call in and say, I have a question about how to file, how to do this or that, or I did file and I'm hearing this from the examiner, you know, what's my next step? We have people who can work with you to address all of those. So the answer to the question is, in many, many ways, we can be of assistance. You're part of one of those right now as we speak, but there's many more things that we can do. And quite frankly, I know I keep going back to the CI squared, but that's also what we're looking at. How can we reinvent ourselves to be able to expand innovation, and that's going to, you know, education is going to be a huge component of that. And so we're reevaluating ourselves, even though we do offer a great deal education right now. And Joyce can also answer this question because, you know, her role at USPTO is the Office of Education and Development. And I'll just say, you know, Doug mentioned earlier that part of his start to this path was this exact program and the interactions with USPTO.
Thank you, and definitely we are very excited about the where we've been and where we're going and how we can use the lessons learned along the way to expand and to reach broader audiences. So extremely excited about that. And so this last question that I think we have time for is from Jenny, who is out of Woodbridge, Virginia, it looks like. And she wants to know from the two of you, what do you think is the most important thing that a teacher or an educator can do to help students embrace the idea that they can create and also profit from their own ideas? So Jenny is a student. She wants to know, what do you think is the most important thing that an educator, that could be a parent, a teacher, and of course parents are educators, what can they do to help students embrace the idea that their ideas have power and that they can create and also profit from those ideas?
I'm happy, since Doug has gone first, I'm happy to go first on this one. So, you know, there's two things that jump to my mind. I think that and I'm basing this in part on a lot of the innovators that I've been fortunate enough to meet over the many years. I would say a teacher can be very helpful in teaching students that it's not only okay, but it's actually desirable to get out of your comfort zone, right? And to expand your own horizons. And I think a lot of people, if people were more comfortable with getting out of their comfort zone, I think they would gravitate towards more innovation. I think sometimes innovation and starting your own business, coming up with an idea is not considered like the safe path. And a theme that I see in successful inventors always is they say, I wasn't afraid to fail. Failure wasn't failure, right? If something didn't work, it was just a lesson to learn for something else, and they weren't afraid of that. So I think that's really important. I also just think that role models are key. And so teachers, this is why we have the stories on our USPTO website. You can search for videos of inventors. I've actually used these for management, quite frankly, to show staff National Inventors Hall of Fame inductees. You show these wonderful videos of what they've accomplished. I think letting people see it makes it real. And so that would be something else that I think teachers can do.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, my whole thing is always to make it real. Even the things that I do in class sometimes that are not going to come to fruition or based in reality, if you can make it as real to the student as possible, they'll buy in. I always joke, Joyce has heard this 100 times, but I had a kid, this kid Timmy years ago said to me, he goes, the stuff we did with you was the most real fake stuff we did in high school. And that's the truth. Some of the things actually turn into real solutions, real projects that they carry on beyond the classroom. I think when you do that and you involve other people from outside, it becomes real. The feedback becomes real. The product becomes real to the student. And the successes and failures are real because this is not a situation where I interpret whether your invention works or not. Ultimately, it either works or it doesn't for the end user. And I'm kind of removed from that, that position, because if you're inventing for a first responder or a fourth grader or whoever, a nurse or whoever we invent for in our class, I'm not the one that has to use it. And as far as profits, I would say the only advice I would give to any student or young person is profits will come. You know, you want to make money now, but the reality is nobody's going to pay you right away or you're not going to make money right away on everything you do. And the experiences that you gain eventually will put you in a position where you're going to do things and you're going to be surprised that people pay you for it, because you're like, this is just what I do because I know how to do it. And you fall into positions, or you work your way into positions where you're doing things based on previous experiences. And when I started out, I can assure you, you know, I was washing windows. I was not making a lot of money. When I first started teaching, I took on a lot of roles and jobs that didn't pay anything or any stipends because I needed to learn how to do things. My first coaching job, when that guy told me I should be a teacher, I was a volunteer coach, which led to teaching, which I get paid for. So I think a lot of the things that you start out with, unfortunately or fortunately, because to be honest with you, it's when you're going to probably have the most fun doing it. That was probably the most fun I ever had coaching, is because I wasn't paid for it and I knew I could leave anytime I wanted. So, you know, there's a lot of freedom in that. And once you get into a position where you're paid, it's a little different. I don't know. That's my advice.
Okay. Well, Mr. Scott, Director Hirshfeld, thank you so much for your time and your attention this evening, for providing wonderful answers and responses to questions about Invention education, and helping us all to think about how we can empower students to transform, as Jenny suggested, our ideas into some type of reality that we can use or share with others, or perhaps sell as well. And so it is very encouraging and exciting to hear this conversation, certainly to look at all the work that the USPTO is doing in this area and moving forth with trying to create innovators and foster innovation throughout. And so I want to thank Drew and Doug for joining us this evening. As I said, you all have broken the record. You've set a high bar for next month's webinar. And so again, very happy and honored to have you. And thank you so much for your time this evening. And we'll put some of the resources that you mentioned, Doug, in the chat. And we also have a few slides that are coming up with some announcements. So again, thank you both.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I believe we're gonna put up just the announcements here. We want to let any of the educators in the office know that if you are looking for a certificate for contact hours for attending this evening's program, you can email us at education@uspto.gov. We're happy to provide those to you. The links on your screen should actually work as well if you click on the links. If you are interested in attending the USPTO's National Summer Teacher Institute on Innovation, STEM, and Intellectual Property, we would love to have you. That application opens up on Tuesday, February 1st. You can find it at the link there on the screen. Doug Scott was in one of the first classes that we had of NSTI. Next month at our February webinar, you will hear from some other NSTI participants in different schools, so that you'll have a chance to get an idea of what different people's experiences have been across the country. But I encourage you to sign in for that. That is on Tuesday, February 22nd. Know that you can always find us here on the last Tuesday of every month from 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. and all are welcome. In addition to these two announcements, I also wanted to let you know that we have some other items that are coming up. There we go. I wanted to just announce that USPTO has actually, the Office of Education has joined forces with the Lemelson MIT program and the U.S. Intellectual Property Alliance to host a series of thematic workshops over the next 4 months, and those are called Invention Adventures. And the February topic is on developing empathic inventors through children's literature. And so another opportunity to provide exposure and access to invention education and to think about how we get more students engaged and involved across disciplines. And last but not least, we value your feedback. We appreciate your participation this evening, and we ask that you please consider filling out our participant survey. And you can find that at the link that's on your screen or by clicking on the QR code there. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening and for participating in the January webinar. Thank you again to Doug Scott, and certainly thank you to Drew Hirshfeld, acting in the position of the Director of the Office of the USPTO. And thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.